The Bay from the Puddle. The old dirt road to Miller's Ridge hadn't been graded in years, so when Clara's pickup rattled over the cattle guard that July evening, dust hung behind her like a slow brown ghost. She'd come looking for the bay colt her grandfather swore had never existed. Check the back 40 after the first hard rain, he'd told her the week before the stroke took his words. You'll know him when you see him. He won't run from you. Clara had laughed then. Grandpa's mind had been slipping for months, but the will left her the entire section, and something about the way his eyes had sharpened for that one sentence made her drive out anyway. The rain had come 2 nights earlier, a sudden summer gully washer, that turned the dry creek bed into a brown torrent for 6 hours and then disappeared as if embarrassed. Now the pasture steamed under a dropping sun, every blade of bluestem glittering. She parked near the windmill, cut the engine, and listened to the world settle. Crickets, a distant meadowlark, the faint metallic creak of the windmill's tail trying to find north. Then she saw him, not 50 yards away, standing motionless in the middle of the biggest puddle left in the draw. Bay coat gone almost black with wet, mane and tail dripping slow ropes of water. He wasn't grazing. He wasn't looking at her. He was simply there, as though the landscape had decided to grow a horse in that exact spot. Clara stepped out, boots sinking into mud. The colt raised his head. Eyes the color of new pennies caught the last light and threw it back at her. She walked closer. He didn't move. When she was close enough to smell wet horse and crushed sage, he lowered his head and blew once, softly, against her outstretched palm. His breath was cool, almost cold. Clara laughed under her breath. "You're real," she said, more to herself than to him. He lifted his dripping muzzle and regarded her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he turned and walked straight into the deepest part of the puddle. The water should have come barely past his fetlocks. It didn't. The surface parted around his knees, then his chest, then his withers, as though the puddle had no bottom at all. Clara's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She took one step forward. The colt kept walking. Now only his head and neck remained above the water, that should not have been deep enough to cover a fence post. His ears flicked back toward her once. "Come on," they said, and then he slipped completely under. The water smoothed over like glass. Clara stood frozen, staring at the empty puddle. No ripples, no bubbles, just reflected clouds and the red smear of sunset. She waited. 1 minute, 2, nothing. Then, from the exact center of the shallow mud, the tip of one dark ear appeared. Then the pool, the forelock dripping, the eyes, still penny bright, watching her. The colt rose straight up out of water that should never have held him, hooves finding purchase on nothing at all, until he stood again on solid ground, dry as desert bone. Not a drop clung to him. He shook once, the way horses do, but no water flew. Only light seemed to scatter off his coat, gold and copper and impossible. Clara's knees felt loose. She reached out anyway. He stepped forward and pressed his forehead to her chest, gentle, steady, real. She buried her fingers in his mane, warm, smelling faintly of rain and something older, like limestone after a storm. "You can't be," she whispered. The colt nickered low in his throat, the sound vibrating through her ribs. Then he turned, walked 3 steps toward the setting sun, and simply wasn't there anymore. No puff of smoke, no dramatic fade, just gone, the way a reflection disappears when the light moves. Clara stood in the empty pasture until full dark arrived. The puddle reflected stars, nothing else. She never told anyone, but every July, after the first hard rain, she still drives to Miller's Ridge and parks by the windmill. She never calls his name, there isn't one, but she waits. So far, he has always come, and every time he walks out of the water that should be too shallow to drown a kitten, she feels the same quiet certainty her grandfather must have felt. Some things are true, whether they're possible or not.